there's a couple of definitions that we need to know, which are these. So a problem can be decomposed into component parts. ये आपका past paper question भी है, and this is a very this was a very poorly performed question. So basically, in whenever we talk about algorithms, we talk about pseudocode and problem solving. So every problem can basically be split into four components. There's input, process, output, and storage. So let's say you are making a game. Maybe you are making uh, लेट्स से एक सिंपल पजल गेम है, ठीक है। सो पजल गेम के अंदर इनपुट्स क्या होंगे कि टच स्क्रीन से आपने जो है वो पजल सॉल्व करना है। प्रोसेस क्या होगा कि व्हेन यू क्लिकिंग द blocks, so the same colored box will be disappearing, and output would be it would be updating your screen, it would be updating the score, etc. And storage would be, let's say if you score high on the leaderboard, तो वो कहीं ना कहीं score save हो रहा होगा. So again, very important to know these some some coming parts in P2 here and there. Then programming constructs may we have sequence, selection, and iteration. So sequence means that the code is executed line by line. Okay. मैं आप लोगों के साथ इसका जो Python वाली फाइल भी शेयर कर देता हूँ. So again, like I said, we'll be doing both of these things side by side. तो इस तरह से again I'm saying कि जो pseudocode है वो आपका बिल्कुल like ये दोनों की syntax जो है वो clear होने चाहिए, क्योंकि you kind of end up mixing them sometimes. All right, so we have sequence and then we have selection. Selection means that you have one of the possible conditions and path in a program that you'll be choosing. और इसको हम implement करने के लिए if condition in case of otherwise use करते हैं. इसकी आप सबसे basic example that you can think of is basically a controller. Yeah, in fact, even keyboard works as well. कि आपने you have to decide कि okay, if I'm let's say going to type in essay, so if I press A तो screen पे A press हो जाएगा, if I press W तो screen पे आ जाएगा, if you guys play games तो if you press X तो it will perform one action, R1, R2 other action, etc. Okay, so this is how they're used in if conditions. Then we have iteration, which is just repeating the block of code. And then there are two types basically that we do in iteration. One is conditional, one is iterative or count control. अच्छा, अब इनके नाम भी आपको लाजमी आने चाहिए. There was this question in AS recently where they asked के for loop जो है वो already given है. Now tell one other type of a loop. So for loop is a count control loop, and when they said कि an other type of a loop तो आपने conditional लिखना था. They did not ask you to specify the name of the loop. They just said कि type. So ये ना बहुत छोटे छोटे differences होते हैं, इस तरह से minor से जहाँ पे 1 1 2 2 marker questions होते हैं where students end up losing marks. So we don't want to do that. So conditional में फिर आगे further you get the preconditional and the postconditional. तो इस पे भी हम बात करते हैं. All right, so we talked about if conditions. They allow us to choose a path from multiple paths. Then I gave the example. So calculator, एक और example है. So you press 9, then you press plus, then you press 2. तो आपका backend पे एक condition लगी होगी कि if user presses plus, तो आपने दोनों operands को आपस में add करके solution उसका screen पे show कर देना है. Okay, then you have this syntax. Again, all of the syntax is taken from this document. तो अगर आप इसको follow कर ले तो मेरे वाले को it's pretty much the same thing. Okay, so I think हमने इस पे last time बात भी की थी. You have if conditions. So if conditions में you have multiple structures. One if condition is needed जब आपने सिर्फ एक ही decision लेना है. So like check if the time is midnight or not. Is midnight or not की भी जो है इसमें कोई space नहीं है. And then you have this indentation. The actual purpose of indentation is to tell that this part of code will only execute once the outer part of the code runs. Okay, so this if condition is true, only then and then this code will execute. और इसकी जो वो है आप समझो technical reason ये है कि Python में brackets नहीं होते. Like Python does not support indentation using curly braces. So अगर आप लोगों ने कभी JavaScript का कोड लिखा हो या C++ का या Java का, तो उसमें you can do indentation in any way as long as they're in the code is wrapped inside the curly braces. But Python में ये नहीं होते, so pseudocode में भी नहीं होते. So that is why we indent to show that they are both dependent. Okay, then we have a scenario 2. इसमें जहाँ पे आपके पास else आ जाता है. So else के आगे आपके पास कभी भी condition नहीं होती because else will only work when other conditions are not true. So even odd, prime or not prime, composite, non-composite, positive है, negative है, ये सब आपके दो scenarios वाले exactly. Then you have scenario 3 where there could be more than 2 options. So then we use else if for that. again आप लोगों के daily life में, let's say you want to go out, you are deciding a restaurant, so then you start discussing options. If restaurant, let's say if Venus is open, so we'll do this. If Cosa Nostra is open, we'll do that. If Arcade is open, we'll do that. Otherwise we'll just take home and order food. तो ये सारे वही वाले डिसीजन हैं जो कि आप लोग डेली लाइफ में लेते हो, बस यहाँ पे यू आर यूजिंग देम टू कम्युनिकेट विद द कंप्यूटर. Okay, then these are some, very easy questions. I think we can skip these. Um, ये वाला देख लेते हैं. Ask the user to input a number, output okay if it is even, otherwise odd. So आपको पता है कि even odd के लिए we always use the modulus operator. अच्छा, now in some of the questions you will see I have created these small trace tables, and I would urge both of you to do the same. So जब भी आप कोई नया pseudocode वाला question, if you encounter it, like I said before, you always should visualize the problem. एंड बाय विजुअलाइजिंग आई मीन कि आप उसके अंदर जो डमी वैल्यूज है उनको आप ड्रॉ कर लो. सो रैंडम वैल्यूज दो, लाइक 2, लाइक 9, लाइक 4, लाइक 8, लाइक आई हैव डन, एंड देन यू ऑलरेडी नो द आउटपुट, राइट? यू नो फॉर श्योर दैट इवन पे ओके होगा और ऑड पे नॉट ओके होगा. So this will give you a good perspective of what the problem is asking you to solve. ठीक है? And then once you have written the code, and since you cannot run the code on the computer, and you'll be writing it on paper, तो आप इसको वो फिर verify भी कर सकते हो. So let's say I wrote this code, I declared. By the way, declaration is very important now. A level में अब declaration compulsory होती है, so you have to declare the variables that you use. So I input, and then I'm using the modulus operator. If the modulus is equal to 0, then output okay, otherwise not okay. All right. So I've written this program. Now let's test it. If I input 9, the output should be not okay. So if I input 9, so 9 modulus 2 is not equal to 0, it's equal to 1. So it will output not okay. This is fine. And let's say if I input 8 means okay, and then endif. And this is also outputting okay. So that means कि our program is working correctly so far. Okay, so इस तरह से आप जो है क्रॉस चेक भी कर सकते हो. Okay, very simple. Number guessing game वाला भी बहुत simple है. I think I will ask you guys to write a nested if question. ठीक है. So number guessing game, again, very simple. You have to ask the user to input a number, and then you have to check if it is greater than, equal than, or less than the guess. और इसमें आपके पास exactly 3 if conditions बनेंगे. Okay, then we have the nested if condition. So nested if condition में what happens is you have these levels of indentation. Let's get rid of this example. आप लोगों के साथ एक example build करता हूँ, and then we'll actually write code for that. Okay, so I think आप दोनों ने मुझे बताया था you guys are into TV shows, या कोई भी आप लोग example बता दो, restaurant food कोई भी, and then we can build on that. Anything in mind? Guys, you don't have anything on your mind or an example?
I think TV shows is fine.
All right. Okay. ठीक है. So let's go with 3 things then, and this example will hopefully make it clear. Yeah. Okay, so you have 3 options. Yeah, you want to either watch a TV show, a movie, or you want to rest. Now, when you select TV show, you have multiple options. So I'll just try random ones. We have Breaking Bad, we have Suits, we have Friends, we have Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Okay. And movies में, so we have 3 films now, and अब इसमें हम ये कर लेते हैं कि let's bring a show that has multiple parts. Okay, let's bring a movie that has multiple parts. So let's go with Batman. It has Begins, it has The Dark Knight, it has Dark Knight Rises. All right. So पहले हम बात करते हैं कि why do we need nested if conditions? So nested if conditions are conditions inside if conditions. ठीक है. अब आपने इनको evaluate कैसे करना है? It's pretty simple. The best way to solve them is by imagining that they have some levels. जैसे आपके पास staircase होता है ना, so staircase में it gets steeper as you step down. So same logic applies here. Let's say you select a TV show. Okay, so इसको हम कर लेते हैं. This would be indentation level 1. इसको हम indentation level 1 कर लेते हैं, and then this all of these are indented inside, so they'll come level 2. And by level 2, I mean that they are literally dependent on if and only if the TV show is selected. Similarly, जो movies है ये आपके level 2 पे, यहाँ Batman तक, and then Batman के आगे जो उसके sequels हैं, they are all in indentation level 3. So I go to movies because they're also at the same indentation level. And if I don't want to watch a movie, then I directly go to rest because again, that is the third option available. Let's say if I want to watch TV show and it's Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so what happens then? Iske baad, where do I go? Because we made the choice and there's no other further indentation level, so we just end this if condition. Perfect. ठीक है. Okay, then let's say we select the movies, and then in movies we further go into Batman. So now we have another option because Batman has multiple sequels. So अब आपने यहाँ से choose करना है. This would take us to level indentation 3, and maybe let's say I go with the Dark Knight. So I select this, and then we can finally end the if condition. So in nested if conditions या nested loop को समझने का सबसे आसान तरीका ये है कि you always imagine that they have levels to them, and then it becomes much easier. ठीक है? So you can convert the same program into Python using GPT या आपने खुद से करने जिस तरह से भी आप करना चाहो. Okay, so same example. अब इसको हम so I like to keep examples जो कि आपकी from beginner to advanced जो है ना उनको हम build upon कर सकें जैसे एक mini project होता है. So सही होता है कि you can clearly see the growth in terms of concept and in terms of you improving as well. तो जैसे ऊपर क्वेश्चन था multiples of 2 and 8 का, now I've added more stuff to it to make it to add nested if conditions वाला concept as well. So ask the user to input an integer and then check if it is multiple of 2 and 8. If it is not a multiple of 2 and 8, then no multiples. Otherwise, check if value is negative, then output any. So सबसे पहले आप इसमें ये चेक करना कि value negative तो नहीं है. So if the value is greater than 0, then we actually perform all the calculations. But if the value is less than 0, we just output any. So if the value is more than 0, then we find the remainders and then we check if they're both 0, then it means okay, and otherwise it means no multiples. ठीक है? Ask the user to input 3 values and output their sum. If the okay, you guys can try this. In fact, ask the user to input 3 values, output their sum and average if they are positive and between 80 to 30. Otherwise, if not positive, then output negative or invalid. Okay, now let's move on to case of otherwise. It's just an alternative to if conditions. और इसमें ये होता है आपके पास कि अगर आपके पास बहुत ज़्यादा एल्सिफ्स लिखे हुए हैं कोड में तो आप उसको केस ऑफ अदरवाइज में कन्वर्ट कर सकते हो. And it's not supported by most of the languages except I think Java में ये होता है, sorry JavaScript में होता है और C में होता है और इसको switch statement भी हम कहते हैं. तो otherwise ये case of जो है ये purely एक आप समझ लो pseudocode related construct है. So it is ideally it can be ideally used when there are a lot of else if conditions. जब आपकी जो else if conditions के अंदर single line जो है ना वो operations हो रहे हैं, not multiple lines. So ये इसका syntax होता है, you write case of, यहाँ पे you have a variable, then you have the otherwise, and then you have the end case. Okay, अगर आप इसकी इस तरह के क्वेश्चन की मार्किंग स्कीम देखोगे ना, तो इसमें 1 मार्क जो होता है वो आपके पास होता है फॉर राइटिंग केस ऑफ विद द करेक्ट वेरिएबल नेम, और फिर जो सेकंड मार्क होता है वो आपका होता है फॉर द करेक्ट सिंटैक्स कि आप अदरवाइज और एंड केस आप अप्रोप्रिएटली यूज कर रहे हो. यू गेट लिटरली 2 मार्क्स बस फॉर द सिंटैक्स, और उसके बाद फिर लॉजिक आती है. फिर उसके बाद 1 मार्क आपको मिलता है कि अगर आपकी एट लीस्ट 1 कंडीशन इज ट्रू, एंड देन यू गेट अनदर मार्क इफ ऑल कंडीशंस आर ट्रू. ठीक है? सो लेट्स से अगर 3 कंडीशंस है और आपकी उसमें से 2 कंडीशंस आपने ठीक लिखी है, 1 इज रॉन्ग, तो यू विल ओनली गेट 1 मार्क फॉर दैट. For the second mark, all of them have to be true. So this is how they are marked. So case of फिर यहाँ पे आपकी first condition आ जाएगी, फिर action which is always separated by a column. If conditions. So जैसे ये हमारा एक if condition का simple calculator code है, if operation is equal to plus, minus, multiply, divide. और अगर हम इसको case of में करें, तो it's very very precise. You just write plus or column, and then you have the operation जो भी आपने action perform करना है. Otherwise में आपका else का equivalent जो भी code है और end case के बाद you can just output the value. Then you can also have ranges in your case of otherwise. तो यहाँ पे आप greater than if value use कर सकते हो, less than value use कर सकते हो, equal to, greater than equal to, less than equal to, इस तरह भी कर सकते हो. And you can also have ranges here like आप यहाँ पे and भी लिख सकते हो. So greater than truth, and let's say and less than 100 इस तरह करके. and less than 100 and less than 100. So ये भी आपको it's perfectly allowed कि आप इनको use कर सको अपने case of otherwise में. Okay, so mostly इस question O level में ही आता है कि जहाँ पे आपको वो restrict करते हैं to using case of otherwise. A level में it's very very rare. So जहाँ पे case of use हो सकता है just use it, otherwise you don't need to if condition is good enough. Okay, then we have the iteration. So we have first of all iteration में हमारे पास for loop आता है. For loop is called iterative or count controlled loop. And the reason we called it count controlled is because we know the number of counts it will repeat for. So when you say I'll study for 2 hours, I'll play football for 3 matches, I will read for 15 minutes, I will sleep for. So for is always followed by some value. और उस value का मतलब ये होता है कि you already know for sure how many times you're going to repeat something. अब for loop के जो syntax है, again very important to write it in the exact way as Cambridge has prescribed us. So इसमें सबसे पहले आपने for लिखना होता है, then you have a variable. आपने देखा होगा it's mostly I, J, K. That is fine, but अगर आपका variable का meaningful name हो तो that is always much preferred. Then you have to define the starting number, then the ending number. Code indented होता है, and then it's followed by next. If you don't write next, you lose 1 mark for not writing complete for loop. So next means to add +1 in the variable. Okay, so यहाँ पे आप अगर आप लिखते हो next है इसका मतलब ये है कि हर दफा I की value by 1 change हो जाए. And in pseudocode, there is no way of breaking a for loop. And if loop is not a word. Achha, this is a very common mistake students make. They will say if loop. So if loop कोई चीज नहीं होती, loop से for while repeat until. And you if condition will only run once until it's put inside it. So then you have a for loop with step function. So step function का फायदा ये होता है कि what if you want to change a value by some value other than 1? अगर आपने जो इसकी iteration है. So you can imagine it when you're going upstairs, so you can always just climb 1 step at a time, or you can also climb 2 steps at a time. So the 2 steps are exactly वही for loop वाला step है. So you will go from first step, then third, then fifth, then 7. या otherwise अगर normal तरीके से चलो तो 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. तो ये वही वाली जो logic है यहाँ पे apply होगी. So यहाँ पे you actually have to write the step keyword और उसके आगे आपने जो है ना number of steps बताने होते हैं कि जिससे आपने skip करना iteration. So output all the values from 1 to 20. आप लोगों को ये already आता है. If you just write I 1 to 20 output I, so it will print all the values from 1 to 20. Output all the values from 20 to 1. Okay, when you have to run a reverse for loop, तो उसके लिए आप ending से start करते हो. You go all the way till the first value, and then you have to make sure कि आप step -1 पे set कर रहे हो. And this is pretty useful when you want to print an array in reverse or when you want to print a string in reverse. And then let's say if you want to print all the even numbers from 2 to 20, तो आप 2 से start करोगे. So first value would be 2. Then next I की जगह instead of going to 3, it will you'll add 2 into 2. So this becomes 4. Then 4 plus 2. Then 6 plus 2. Then 8 plus 2, etc. So एक ये method है आपका to output all the even numbers from 1 to 20 जो आपको already आता है. You find the remainder and then you check if it is equal to 0. या फिर the other simpler method is simply run a loop from 2 to 20 and that's it. ठीक है. और इसमें then there are 2 new things. One is called counting, one is called totaling. Counting means that you increment or decrement a variable by 1. So you इसमें भी आपको initialization is always needed. So initialization is must. So count is equal to count plus 1, count is equal to count minus 1. और totaling में क्या होता है? You add a value into a variable and then you keep on updating that variable. So यहाँ पे करने के लिए you use total is equal to total plus val. You don't necessarily have to use the same name. यहाँ पे कोई भी name हो सकता है. बस जो left side पे variable होगा वही right side पे आएगा and then it should be followed by some random value. Okay, so also use it to input 10 values and output the count of positive, negative, and 0 values. So you guys will be doing this. This would be the last question for today. और इसकी अगर हमने देखो पहले अगर हम इसको थोड़ा सा विजुलाइज करने की कोशिश करें, so पहले आपके तीनों counters would be 0. Then when you input 12, so the positive count becomes 1. You input another positive number, it becomes 2. Then you input 0, so 0 counter becomes 1. You input a negative number, it becomes 1. And this will happen for 10 times. And then you will output the final counters. So positive count मेरी 3 output हो जाएगी, negative 1 हो जाएगी और 0, 2 हो जाएगी. So this is what you have to do. and again they should be properly labeled. The counts of positive, negative, it's 0. ठीक है? So this would be 1 2 3 4 5 5 mark question है ये भी आपका दोबारा से.